Welcome back to this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast brought to you by Cropster. In this episode, we'll discuss QR codes, a brief history on QR codes, where they are today, and where they'll be in the future. Along with that, we'll discuss their role in specialty coffee and society in general. So sit back, have a coffee, and enjoy this episode. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channels. Norbert, QR codes. It's a very fascinating, very interesting thing in technology, I would say. They've been around for 10 years or so, or something like that. So in a way, it could seem like a thing of the past, yet it seems like it's still a thing of the future with so much potential.
Absolutely. So, Nick, this is so QR codes are around for a long time. I actually looked it up, and Wikipedia says since '94, so almost 30 years, when a Japanese automobile company invented them. But they are totally still a mystery and underused. So I think it's good to dive a little bit into that topic. I think there's a few technical things we can discuss, and then also see applications.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So maybe let's just first defining for our listeners, what is a QR code, and how does that even differentiate between a barcode?
Yeah, excellent question. So a QR code, let's start with a barcode. So a barcode is a number of bars next to each other, and if they are defined as an EAN code or a product code, so something you find on your items you buy in a supermarket, then this is exactly, I think, 13 digits. So it's a definition of how many numerical digits there can be in a specific barcode. But there's also barcodes which can be longer. They just take up more space, and there's a certain algorithm which validates them.
Mhm.
So ultimately, in a barcode, you can encode numbers. And then some barcodes are able to also get some letters in, but that's about it. And the amount of information you can put in is very limited. So we define that by the amount of space you need to print that barcode versus the amount of information you can store. Now you have the QR code. In contrast, the QR code is really an expansion of that. The QR code is two-dimensional, so we are not only have one dimension like the barcode, we have two.
Okay.
So it's a pattern, and in that pattern we can store way more information points. And here we have letters and numbers, and then a few extra specific items which can be stored, like unified tags, for example, a URL or an email address.
And does that apply to images as well?
No, images cannot be stored. Well, no, images cannot be stored in a QR code. That makes not much sense.
Okay.
What you see sometimes, you see an image in the QR code, but that's really just there's an image and there's a code.
Okay.
And they both are overlaid in a way that the code is readable and the image looks cool.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay.
So now we have a code which contains much more information. And why is that important? For example, a web address. A web address can easily have 40, 50, 60 digits. So it's a string so it starts with maybe HTTPS www.cropster.com/products and so on. So if you want to lead someone to that website, you already need some space for that. And that is the beauty of a QR code. It gives you more space. What is the drawback is you need a scanner, a camera basically, taking up that image. And that's why we feel that QR codes are only around for about 10 years. That's when our cell phones with internet connectivity and great cameras really were a thing of the masses. So a lot of people got them.
Yeah.
And suddenly there was more application for end users.
Okay.
As I said, the inventors was an automotive company, so the automobile industry would use it to code their parts, the auto parts, and then they would have scanners and cameras all along the production lines to to read that information.
Okay.
But that's a very industry-specific application. Let's say that's a very contained ecosystem.
Yeah.
And the opening that ecosystem up to end users, to everybody who has a cell phone or a camera or a laptop with a camera, that leverages that technology substantially, and that means, well, now, as you know, we can use it for marketing, we can use it for product information, we can encode information which would take up, I don't know, 5 lines on a product in a very small barcode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only that, so it's not only the information we can put in, but also having the hyperlink, an internet address basically linked to more information, connects a product or a piece of paper or a contract or whatever we have with an internet system, with a platform with much more information.
Yeah. So, to be honest, I've never really thought about you need a camera for a QR code, just because for us, like, it's so at our fingertips. Oh, scan the QR code. You never think like you need a camera to scan it. And
Right.
it's interesting because it makes me think of a question of accessibility. It makes me think, is this still an inaccessible or accessible technology? And I say that from the perspective of, let's, in our case, coffee, the coffee producer, those at origin, across the industry, it seems like QR codes are slowly being more and more adopted, but it makes me think, well, is this still an accessible technology for the producer who may not even have access to a smartphone to scan these QR codes, right?
Yes. Very, very valid question. Very valid point. See, the accessibility is exactly what makes or breaks a technology.
Hmm.
And with QR codes, we saw interesting stories. So when QR codes were popular, and they had its popularity, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, when smartphones came out, and especially Android phones. So they had the capability where you would use your camera app, hold it over that QR code, and the app would give you a link and say, click here, and I send you to that website.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fully integrated into the mobile device.
Okay.
With Apple, that was a little bit different. With Apple, you had to download an app, which then would read that QR code
Mm-hmm.
and then send you to the website. So it's more cumbersome.
Mm.
That's why the uptake of that technology with iPhones was much slower until last year, when Apple decided to integrate the QR code scanner into their camera app.
Okay. Yeah.
See, and so it really needs to be simple for the end user.
Yeah.
We don't want to download a specific app for all kinds of specific things.
Yeah.
Especially not when they are fairly generic.
Yeah.
So so it's a software problem, it's a hardware problem, and then of course, what content is there?
Mm.
Because just a website, I mean, honestly, if you just encrypt Cropster.com, that's not so exciting. A lot of people can just type it into their phones and find that website.
Yeah.
But if you give them a very specific locator where they can find information about a specific event they are, or a specific place, or museums were using it sometimes for a specific artifact you would look at. So you just hold that phone over that QR code, and then you get information about that artifact or about that event you're at, and you don't have to look that up cumbersome on a website or type in long URLs.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just also this idea of being able to streamline this kind of service, or streamline it without, like you said, having to download an app and then going through all these different hurdles to get to where you need to go. But also, like, let's apply it to us in coffee, Slick.
Mm-hmm.
Slick is a good example of a QR code, I would say, and not just, like you said, going to cropster.com, but rather accessing coffee information, yes, through our software, our system, but being able to access something very specific that could pertain and be very important to the supply chain or someone in the supply
Right.
chain, right?
So with Slick, we actually took a little bit another route. We wanted to make things very information travel very lightly
Mm,
and easily without internet access necessarily.
mm,
So the Slick code actually encrypts sample information directly into that code, and that you see how much space there is really.
yeah.
So in such a rather small code, you can encrypt lot, name, country of origin, varietal, certain quality readings, even a small description about that sample, codes, tracking codes, sample codes. So I think 10 or so data points can be easily encrypted,
Okay.
and we wanted to make it so easy that people can encrypt it into the code, stick it on the sample,
Okay.
and someone else with a phone can read that information.
Mm,
And we basically give them the raw data as a string.
okay.
So if some third party wants to use it to import that information, they could.
Okay.
But we also give them a reader app. So they are automatically going onto the Cropster website
Got it.
where that information is basically decoded and presented in a very beautiful, easily readable way
Okay.
for either download as PDF or integration into the Cropster ecosystem so you can upload that information again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting you say that too, because, when I think about QR codes and, having internet, for example, it makes me think back to during COVID when I was in Colombia and, well, not even just in Colombia, but all over the world, restaurants, for example, started using QR codes and we still do use them.
Mhm.
But for me in particular in Colombia, where, I don't have service or I don't always have Wi-Fi, it was a good idea to keep things contactless. But, for a foreigner, for example, using QR codes with no internet, it made things a little bit problematic because now, yes, you have a smartphone, you can access the QR code, but if you don't have internet, now that QR code is still inaccessible, right?
Right. And that's, I mean, for a menu, and that's a great example. The menu in a restaurant is just really hard to encode because it's so long, and you just can't possibly, except if you're like in an ice cream shop and you can see the 10 options or so. um,
Mhm.
so they need to have that workaround of pointing you to a website. Um, but that's again. So in an internet connected world, the QR code can be used as intermediary um, of finding information, specific information on the web.
Okay.
But it's not a replacement for sending large documents or encoding large documents.
This episode is brought to you by Cropster, a software solution for coffee professionals across the entire supply chain. Do you find yourself wasting a lot of time using pen and paper to document and record all the information that goes through your business? Well, Cropster's here to help. With our system, you can easily record, manage, analyze, and trace all of your coffee's data from seed to cup. Whether you're a producer, exporter, importer, roaster, or barista, Cropster has a solution for you. So then another thing that, all of this makes me think about as well with like this idea of access to this information encoded in a QR code, it makes me think of a simple question. Are QR codes safe and are they effective? In technology,
Mhm.
a lot, there's always the question of, is it secure? Is it safe?
Yes, yes,
Right?
absolutely. No, and that's it. That's the the QR code itself is neither safe nor unsafe.
Okay.
What so that's why it's important to understand what's behind it. What is behind it? It's a web address. So when you hold your phone over a QR code, the phone tells you to which URL, to which web address that link is going to.
Mm,
And if you see like if the code pretends to be a Cropster code, says, "Hey, Cropster, scan here for sample information." You hold it over that code, and the URL tells you it goes to hacker123.com. well, then you should not open. You should not click there because it goes to a hacker site, right? Usually, people are very smart, so they, of course, would make it so it's not so easy to read. But usually, you can figure it out. And then again, Cropster has protected its own websites and similar websites, but of course, it's not so extensive that nothing can happen. No company can do that.
Yeah.
Even like Apple and Google, there is always way to fake their URLs a little bit and change their names.
Yeah, that's true.
It's obviously a responsibility, right? Where do you click? And that's exactly the same thing. You should know before you click in an email, before you click online onto a link, where does this link go, and is it safe?
Mm-hmm.
And the safety is, of course, also supported. I mean, the good web browsers now are very smart. They can already warn you.
Mm-hmm.
So Google Chrome warns you. Apple Safari, they warn you. Firefox, all those systems have already warning mechanisms. It's like, hey, this might not go into a direction you want to. Please double check.
That's so true. And it's funny you say that you can easily try slightly mimic, like those bigger companies and get tricked into going there because, I've come across some of those iffy moments as well. So another question I'm curious is if we apply it specifically to, let's say, coffee professionals. I've seen a handful of examples and a good amount of QR codes being used in the industry at cafes, on coffee bags and whatnot. But I'm wondering what makes a QR code, what actually makes it a useful tool for coffee professionals and coffee consumers when QR codes are accessible?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so. QR codes can help get more access to information, or better access to information which is not easily printed on a small bag or on a small in a small environment,
Mm-hmm.
or information which is not only text or pictures but also interactive. So that's where the QR code can link you to more. And that more can be a video, that more can be a description, that more can be pictures, that more can be a full ecosystem of augmented reality websites where you can dive into a coffee farm, for example, and feel you're visiting that farm where that coffee comes from, right? That could be an example for end consumers. It could be a link to all the quality information. So a green coffee buyer does not only get the label telling them the variety and the country and the name of the farm, but really a full featured like cupping and physical analysis data set. So for those reasons, coding products with a QR code and allowing more access is really a good idea.
Yeah.
But people who have tried doing that also realize it is a lot of work to maintain that related information, and you want to be always sure that your product links into the right information and to the most updated information. So the maintenance is not can be quite some work.
Yeah.
Same with with websites, right? It's super annoying when you get a link and you want to go there and then says, well, information is not there. So you totally break expectations, and that's frustrating. And if you operate this on your website, people can tell you, it's like, hey, there's a missing link. You can fix that. With a QR code, once it's out there, once it's printed, once it's physically available, you have to think that that information lives as long as that product, as long as this piece of paper is around, which might be 1 month, or it might be 5 years. So you rather maintain whatever that linked information is for that amount of time. And that can be a challenge, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this idea of, we keep mentioning access to information, for example, and while, you can access, whatever the person behind the QR codes makes available in that QR code information is available. I'm wondering what place does not just, let's say, pricing of, let's just talk in terms of coffee. What place does not just pricing of the coffee in QR codes, but being able to take it a step further, and what place does being able to pay for coffees through QR codes or through the links in QR codes, have as QR codes move forward? I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, not totally. I think the QR code itself, again, is just a means to an end. It's just a tool.
okay, okay,
Um, and in terms of like paying for stuff, yes, a QR code would make it really easy for an end consumer, for example, if traceability is intact, if we know where the coffee comes from, and it's coded into a QR code to leave a tip for the farmer or connect with that farmer.
mm,
It is easy to pay. Just the other day, and that's new to me. See, after
yeah,
like QR codes around almost 30 years, and only three weeks ago, a waiter in a restaurant put a bill on the table and said, "Oh, you can pay it online." It's like I mean, in a restaurant, you leave your card and that's what you do. But I think also
yeah,
COVID has sped up that process.
yeah,
So in this case, yeah, I was holding my phone over that QR code. It would say, "Hey, this is the payment system XYZ, and do you agree to pay $30 to this restaurant?" And I would say yes, and then confirm with Apple Pay, and it's done. It, it's mind blowing. It took me
yeah,
3 seconds. The bill was settled. On the way out, I felt a little bit weird. It's like, I did pay. And he said, "Yeah, it's all good. No worries." Because I felt like that transaction I wasn't clear if the waiter would know if I had paid or not. um, anyway, that's just my upbringing. I think, of course, people would pay. So speeding up processes, getting easy access to certain systems without looking up websites, without typing in information.
yeah,
That's where QR codes are fantastic.
yeah,
And that can help in the coffee supply chain to identify containers, to identify um, green coffees, identify roasted coffee. Especially the real estate on a coffee bag is not the biggest, and I'm speaking about the roasted coffee in a supermarket or in a coffee shop.
mm,
You don't have a lot
mhm,
of options to really print all that information about traceability, about the farmer, about the farm, all those pictures onto the bag.
yeah, yeah,
So
that's true.
having this auxiliary code, it's like, hey, this is the coffee name, this is the weight, this is the brand, and if you want more, click here.
Yeah,
It keeps the design really clean, and it wouldn't be too much in your face for people who just don't want to go deeper.
yeah,
So it's like this optional. If you want to learn more, go here and learn and connect.
yep,
But if you don't worry about it. It's just a QR code, and since QR codes can be shaped and can be made into a little bit graphics, so it might even
mm,
look nice and interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, and it's nice you said that, because not everybody was going to use the QR code, or even has interest in going or seeing what's behind that QR code. But it goes back to this idea of giving the consumer the choice, allowing them to feel empowered, and to feel, it goes back to our other episode, and how we discussed allowing the consumer to really pick and choose what information they want and when they want it, rather than
Mhm.
forcefully shoving it down their throat and saying, "Hey, you need to know all this information," because that's not always the healthiest way to
Right.
go about it.
I
Sharing
see.
important information, I would say.
I see also huge efficiencies here. And the restaurant example we had last year is one of those. Restaurants don't have to print menus anymore.
Yeah.
Some restaurants have daily menus. They don't have to print them anymore. Just send me to that website where the updated information is. So instead of typing this up, printing it, copying it, or printing it 100 times, and
Mm-hmm.
then either using it or not, they just have to go to an online portal, change the daily menu, click save, and it's updated for everybody in real time. Just go with your QR code onto to that menu or go to that website of that restaurant. And I think that's what's interesting in dynamic industries.
Yeah.
And coffee is dynamic. The coffee offering in a coffee shop changes. The way coffee was produced this year, the year before, even if it comes from the same farm, can be different.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not yet there where we really would have, only in very rare cases, we can follow the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a generic harvest on that farm,
Yeah.
but that specific harvest. I mean, just think about it. What if we would get a video where my beans, well, the beans I'm buying, are picked, are processed, and I know that happened 2 months ago. That was exactly the beans in my bags. That's where they come from.
Yeah.
And
that'd be crazy. That'd be nice.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think it's not, exactly. It would be very nice, but just think about it further. Farmers face a lot of problems. There's weather changes. There's soil problems. There's all kinds of things. If those things can be communicated a little bit better, that it's actually really hard to produce that coffee, then I think end consumers can appreciate, if the quality turns out really high, they can appreciate that even more. And if the quality is not turning out so high, but they have already this relationship with the farm, they would still say, "No, I'm committed. I'm buying this coffee at the same price because I want to help that farmer out." There were some issues, but I'm fully informed. I was kind of fully included in the making of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's super important. And it also, going back to when you mentioned menus, for example, it makes me think that QR codes are actually a sustainable technology. It's literally environmentally sustainable. If you're replacing your menus or anything paper form now with QR codes, it literally makes our world more sustainable in a very simple way, and honestly, and that kind of leads me now to my next question and final question is, why are QR codes the future? What makes them something of the future? Obviously, we speak on it being sustainable because now it's paperless, but with COVID speeding things up, I'm sure it's shown us a lot of the potential of QR codes, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, the future lies in the base technology. More and more people have access to smartphones, and more people are connected with those phones to internet, and that just opens up the playground, I would say. So more people can play, more people can participate. Which again, 10 years ago was still a thing of the few people who got into that technology. Now it's gotten cheaper, gotten more accessible. So that's where I see also including farmers, including more people. And the second thing is, of course, training. As with always with newer technologies, I think the pandemic has helped to speed up that process of understanding that a QR code means this is my menu. And I'm thinking about my parents, for example. It's like, what would they have smartphones, but would they know what to do with them? Would they know how to use that with QR codes? And I think I'm almost pretty sure last year they learned how to do that. And
they had to.
Exactly. It's not hard, it's one of those things. It's not that you need a training class to understand QR codes or hold your phone over and click. But it takes doing it once or twice. But if the menu is just there, or if the alternative is so close, and the alternative is what they have done always, I would say then the incentive is less. But if at some point there's only the QR code, and that's how we pay, that's how we that's another thing. See, when I paid my bill, the waiter didn't bring another receipt. I had my receipt on my phone. So in case this is, for example, a business expense, I just print a PDF. I'm good to go. No extra paper needed, and cumbersome scanning and processing of that paper. So I think that adoption is coming together. And as I said, with iPhone, or Apple deciding to integrate that technology right into their camera app, that makes all the difference. Now QR codes can be used again on iPhones. Before, the uptake was just not there.
Yeah. No. Super interesting, Norbert. A lot of information. It's really good. Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thanks a lot for listening to this episode on QR codes on the Coffee and Technology podcast brought to you by Cropster. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed discussing this interesting topic. If you'd like to learn more about all things coffee and tech, be sure to visit our website at cropster.com/learn. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channels to get the latest episode. Cheers to the future of coffee and tech.